the most interesting attorney in the world. He speaks Latin in 7 other languages. His suits are made of 200% cotton, and his ties are of the finest silks. He will often take a jury trial because he enjoys conversing with others. The bar exam? It was written about his life. He is the most interesting attorney in the world.
I don't always discuss law, but when I do, it's at
8 a.m. on WIOO.
Stay classy, my friend.
Business.com. Country Gold Radio, it is 8:09, and it's time now for Weekend Appointment with Attorney Carl Rominger, live in the studio.
Good morning.
Good morning.
1-800-734-2132. 1-800-734-2132. That's the talk line number. If you have a legal question you want to get answered here on the radio this morning, as you know, I'm Carl Rominger. I'm an attorney here in the Mid-State, and I'm going to answer your legal questions. So 1-800-734-2132. And give us a call here. Again, 1-800-734-2132. Anything you want to talk about. If you've got a landlord-tenant issue, if you've got a problem with your neighbor's fence, all the things people call my office about all week long. But the difference here on the radio is you get your question answered for free, and you get a little free advice and maybe a kick in the right direction. Sometimes I tell you there's not much that can be done. Sometimes my favorite one is, well, have you asked the guy yet? My neighbor's got a tree and it's hanging in my yard and it's falling in my pool, and what am I going to do? And I said, you ask your neighbor if you could cut the branch down. No, I never thought of that. Well, that's where you start a lot of times. Again, 1-800-734-2132. In the news this week, a judge in New York has ruled that the NSA's bulk telephone data collection is constitutional. That was Judge Pauley, Pauley, of New York, who happens to be situated right by the former World Trade Center in his chambers there. Very different from just 11 days ago, where Judge Leon down in D.C. said that the NSA's bulk collection was absolutely unconstitutional. What they seem to be fighting over is a 1979 case, which we all learn in law school, called Smith v. Maryland. And Mr. Smith had had an issue with the police getting the phone numbers he had dialed from the phone company. And there the court said, well, you have no expectation of privacy. No expectation of privacy in the phone number because you shared that with a third party. In other words, when you dialed the phone to get in contact with your friends or your criminal associates, you dialed the digits, and the digits were given to a third party, the phone company. And therefore, since you told a third party who you were calling, there was no expectation of privacy in that. That case had to do with one person making a small series of calls with a specific request from the police, from the phone company without a warrant. And that is the case from 1979 that actually our Supreme Court kind of grappled with recently, when the police had taken a GPS unit and placed it without a warrant on someone's car and left it on the car. And I don't think they ever had a warrant for that GPS unit, but they left it on the guy's car for about a month, and they used the GPS unit in the prosecution against him later. And he argued that the police shouldn't be able to just GPS your car willy-nilly. And the justices had a really big problem with it because of not only the secrecy of it, but also the length and duration of the government spying and the expectation of privacy. So I'm pretty sure that was warrantless. And they talked about this 1979 Smith v. Maryland case and said perhaps it needed to be revisited and perhaps overruled because the way we think of privacy and information and the way we live in the modern era has changed. So watch your legal news section here, and I'll keep you updated. But obviously with two trial judges coming to vastly different conclusions on the same thing, it's setting up a fight in the Supreme Court, but this has to go through the appellate courts first. So there's another round. The circuit courts will have to hear it first, and then it will end up in front of the U.S. Supreme Court if the circuits are still split. Perhaps the circuits will answer the question, but we shall see. And interestingly, by the way, the two judicial opinions are different than the presidential panel that Obama put in. So the one judge says it's constitutional and that it would have helped potentially with 9/11. The other judge says it's unconstitutional. It's never been demonstrated help on anything at all, nor did the government bring forward any evidence of any way that has, in fact, helped with anything. The presidential panel said, well, it's useful. It could be necessary someday, but it should be held in the hands of a third party, and a court order should be required to query it. So they were somewhere in between. So all three people who have reviewed it recently, two judges and a presidential panel, have all come to separate conclusions on whether the NSA's snooping of your metadata and phone records is constitutional and whether or not it should continue as it is. So it's very interesting. 1-800-734-2132. Again, 1-800-734-2132. We're live. I know you guys have been listening to this show here in this slot for a while now, and you know we just went live. We used to be the best ofs, cans, repeats, whatever you want to call them, and so I know you couldn't call in, but now you can, so I got to get you educated on that. 1-800-734-2132. If you have a legal question, you're sitting around, or you have a story. I always like good stories, too. If you were on a jury and you had some jury duty one time, we always like to hear about that as well. Or when you went to the local magistrate to fight a landlord-tenant thing or a speeding ticket and the judge did something funny. We've had some pretty interesting war stories come in over the years. 1-800-734-2132. And by the way, that's our one call number. And what I mean by that is if you call that number during the show and we're live, you'll come through and be screened and put on the air. If you call that number when I'm not on the air, it'll go through to my voicemail system. And if my office is open during the week, it'll go through to my office. So any which way, you'll be able to get your question asked. So jot that number down, 1-800-734-2132. And get your legal question answered anytime, 24/7, basically. Of course, during the week, you'll get the staff, and during the off hours, you'll get the voicemail. But if we're on the air, you'll come on live like if you called right now. So again, one more time, 1-800-734-2132. I want to remind you, Harrisburg Beer and Cigar over on Union Deposit Road in Harrisburg has one of the biggest selections of cigars in central Pennsylvania, an amazing walk-in humidor, and a kick-butt selection of beer as well. And so if you're over Harrisburg Way shopping, you go down to Union Deposit Road over in Harrisburg, right across from the Outback and next to the Lowe's and the Plaza back there. It's Harrisburg Beer and Cigar. And just tell them Carl sent you. They'll chuckle a little bit, I'm sure. And they got a great lounge in there. So if you are a cigar smoker and you're someone who, your wife likes to kick you out of the house, or you have to go stand behind the wood pile and hide from your kids while you smoke your cigar, stop in there. They got a beautiful lounge, and I think this weekend, tomorrow, from 1 noon on, I think they're doing a football party over there. So you're going to get some food, some cigars. It's pretty awesome. So give it a try. Well, let's see. What else do I want to talk to you guys about? How about a little help on child custody? I get this. Of course, this time of the year with Christmas, we've gotten the phone calls, he hasn't picked the kids up for Christmas, or she was late delivering them. Everybody goes hysterical at the holidays. But sometimes it's absolutely necessary. And, of course, getting anything done on a holiday with the courts is almost impossible, so you have to almost anticipate the problems. But if you're in a new custody situation, if you've just split up with your ex or you're thinking about it, and you're trying to figure out how are we going to divide the kids or how does this work, let me give you a little overview. Again, it's 1-800-734-2132 if you have a specific question about anything legal. You can get on, you can interrupt me, but I'm going to talk about custody for a minute. So again, 1-800-734-2132. But custody-wise, well, how does it work? The courts, there's no presumption that the woman gets the child. There's no presumption that the man is more or less fit than the woman. We start with the presumption that both parents are equally fit. However, let's look at it this way. The one who leaves the marital home, right, they already have one leg down, so to speak. They already have one strike against them, because where have the kids probably lived all their lives? Well, in the marital home or in the cohabitation home. And it's going to definitely be in the school district where the kids go to school if the kids are school age, okay? So let's talk about this. If you're going to move out, don't move 50 miles away. Don't move 150 miles away. Stay local, because if you're not local, your judge is going to have a hard time awarding you a large percentage of the custody, at least initially, because, you're too far away. Now, if you stay local and you stay in the same school district, you'll have a great argument that if nothing else, you should have the kids a huge amount of the time, if not half of the time or all the time, at least some significant percentage, because it won't interfere with schooling and it won't interfere with travel. Sometimes we have people, they claim that they're going to get the kid up at 5 a.m. and drive him an hour to school every morning, and judges just don't buy that. Now, I'm not so sympathetic. My mom used to wake my brother and I up at 5 a.m. to go shovel snow in the wintertime, and we did that. I can't understand why that would be a problem, but hey, that's my theory. But a lot of judges just won't buy waking the kids up early and trucking them around, and actually over time it's probably not good for them. So stay local. You got the idea? Don't move in with some sketchy person. That's the number one problem we have. People sometimes move in with the guy they met at the bar, the girl they met on the internet, and they don't realize it, but they have a criminal record. Well, in this day and age, criminal records can create big issues, because if you or anybody in your household has a criminal record, there is a predilection not to allow that person to be around the children until they've been cleared. And that clearance can be complicated sometimes. It can require a psychologist or licensed social worker to say that they're safe. Courts can also make the determination of minor crimes themselves. But nonetheless, that crops up a lot too. You discover that the person you moved in with, also moving in with somebody and exposing the children to them for long periods of time, the judge is going to look at how long have you been with this person? How well do you know him? How likely is that relationship to last? The psychologists have told us. And by the way, if you go and check us out on Spreaker, which we'll be podcasting this show on, we have a show up there where we talk to a custody evaluator. It's very interesting. He's a psychiatrist who does custody evaluations. Well, one of the problems that they tell us, the psychiatrists do, it's not that the new person is bad or evil like your spouse believes, but quite frankly, that your kid could become attached to that person. So if you start dating, Mrs. Wonderful on January 1st and introduce your child to that person, and then you guys break up on March 1st, your child will become attached to that lady. Your child will start to like that person, and when they leave, it traumatizes the child. And so people who go through serial boyfriends and girlfriends where they expose the kids to them heavily and move in, etc., actually damage their children, because they keep becoming attached to somebody, and then that relationship keeps getting uprooted, and that actually gives them emotional and attachment issues in the long term. So again, moving in with the flavor of the day and moving out from the flavor of the day is not going to behoove you, not for the reasons necessarily that a lot of people think, but because it's just not good for the kids, even if that person is wonderful. May also say something about yourself if you have to keep jumping from person to person to person. So keep all those things in mind. What else do we talk about when you first separate? Well, you should have a plan. Here's where I'm going to stay. Here's when I think we can have the kids. And if you can do a rational discussion with the other side, that's great. A lot of times that's not possible. And that's where going to court sometimes is necessary. Now, believe it or not, a lot of couples split up and they never go to court. Dad moves out and mom says, all right, you're going to have the kids every other weekend and one night a week because that's what my girlfriend does. And dad says, all right, that's what I want to do. And they never go see a court. Or we're going to live 10 miles apart. We're both cool, level-headed people. We're both mad. We're going to have to get a divorce or sort out our property issues, but let's just split the kids. And so about a third of the couples that break up never have to go see a lawyer, never have to fight anything out because they can just naturally say, hey, this is pretty easy. On the other hand, a lot of people just need the first go-around, all the emotions there. So you're fighting, you're breaking up, somebody's cheated on somebody, somebody's moving out, everybody's just throwing their hands in the air, not sure what to do. Well, what do you do in that case? Well, if somebody files and goes to court, a lot of times the conciliator, and again, if you want to jump in this conversation, it's 1-800-734-2132, 1-800-734-2132. A lot of times the conciliator can just sort of say, hey, kids, this is the way you're going to separate your kids. Let's be emotionally mature here. Let's figure this out. And that having that third party mediate it allows the sides to come to conclusions. And I think it's an important process because I always used to joke that as the lawyer, I'd bring the client in and tell him this is how it should work or this is how it's going to work. And the client doesn't quite believe me or doesn't want to agree. And then we go see the judge or the mediator. and they work it out on the same terms that maybe the lawyers had suggested to their parties originally. But I think it's a process a lot of times, coming to terms with how the custody will be divided, how it will work. And it's important, by the way, to move pretty early. It's not necessary to be the first to file. Everybody's always worried they'd be the first to file. But if you're not happy with the custody situation, don't let it go 6 months, 8 months, or a year. Because one of the things we look at, one of the most important factors we look at is, what have the parties been doing for about the last 6 months or maybe a little longer, and how has it been working? So if your child is doing well in school and seemingly adjusted and nothing showing as obvious problems, and you've been living with the current arrangement for 6 or more months, a judge is going to say, that's the status quo, it's working, the horse ain't broke, don't fix it. That's right. Why would we fix the broke horse? Or not broke horse? For that, I mean, got to figure. Can you fix a broke horse? I don't know. You put it down, actually. So maybe it's not a good analogy. But the long story short is you want to be careful. So I have people that come to me, and this is the answer I get. Well, I was just waiting until the right time, or I just wanted to get things just a little more settled before I understand, because a minute ago I was telling you got to have a plan, you need to be in position, et cetera, et cetera. But if you sit on your hands too long, that alone can create the status quo. And then the burden of showing that it's in the child's best interest to change custody is harder to meet when the status quo is well set and the kids are thriving. On the other hand, if the status quo is terrible and the kid's flunking out of school, and the 12-year-old says they want to live with you, those are all factors the judge can consider and may be helpful. So I strongly just advise people, move as soon as you can. And I know one of the big issues that comes up is money. One of the things you're going to have to do is talk with a lawyer or talk with various lawyers. I had a client one time, and she didn't go for custody. And when we got to court, after she'd hired me, and I knew, of course, the answer to this, but the judge looks at her and said, why didn't you hire a lawyer sooner? It seems like, nothing, you could have been here a year ago, if these are your issues. And she looked at him and she said, well, I met with one lawyer and he told me it was $3,500 minimum for a retainer, and I didn't have $3,500. And she's like, so I didn't know what to do. And the judge looks at her and goes, you didn't talk to any other lawyers? And she's like, no, I just assumed they all charge the same thing. Why did she assume that they all charge the same thing? Because the Pennsylvania Bar Association, the Supreme Court, and our rules and traditional lawyer advertising rules throughout the nation say that lawyers shall not advertise price, because we are not a business, we're a profession. That's what they claim. Now, people have advertised price, and as you know, you can find divorces now advertised with price, because the bar associations and the courts and the regulators ran into a little problem called the First Amendment. Imagine that. The people who regulate lawyers couldn't see the First Amendment staring them in the face. The courts have said that non-misleading advertising, especially for routine legal matters, you can say price because it interferes with the First Amendment rights of the lawyers. Well, what it really interferes with is the idea that this gal didn't realize that a lot of other lawyers might have taken $500 down, or might have taken $0 down to get started and worked out a financing or a payment plan. I know in my office, for instance, we quite often require a retainer up front, but it's not $3,500 for custody matters. It's a lot less than that. But under other circumstances, and if people are creditworthy, we've worked out payment plans and arrangements where people can pay over time to give access to the system. And she didn't know that. But my point is you need to shop around a little bit, even if you're scraping. If the custody is important, you're going to go find the money. I always tell people, find grandma, find grandpa, get a brother, get a sister, put hat in hand if you have to. Because if you sit on those hands too long, you may lose your chance to change the custody around. So I hope you get my general drift here. Now, there's a lot that goes into custody cases besides what I've just talked about. And actually, the legislature has 16 factors they want the judges to consider these days that were codified into law. The 16th of which is, by the way, and any other factor that's relevant in this case. But you're now, when they say you teach for the test, with teachers, they say after the state comes out with a test that the teachers teach to the test and the kids just learn what's on the test. Well, the lawyers now litigate to the statute. The judge's got 15 factors to look at. Well, we point them at those 15 factors. That's the plan. All right, 1-800-734-2132. I'm going to take a break here and go to commercial. But before I do, I want to remind you about RJ Gold Auctions. If you need to liquidate an estate or business, I recommend you call RJ Gold Auctions. He can buy outright or sell your items at auction. RJ Gold can be reached at 645-0061. Again, that's 717-645-0061. RJ Gold. He purchases items outright, such as medals, pins, patches, tokens, awards, and badges, and most historical collectibles. He can pay you right away. So I know if you're looking for a little extra pocket change, and you've got some medals, pins, patches, tokens, awards, or badges, or a historical collectible, call RJ at 645-0061.
Have you been charged with a DUI? Rominger and Associates has the training and experience necessary to fight for your rights. If you've been charged, you're likely facing a mandatory jail sentence and loss of your driver's license. You need aggressive legal representation in your corner. Call now to schedule your free initial consultation. 1-800-734-2132. That's 1-800-734-2132. The law offices of Rominger and Associates. Let us fight for you.
Yeah.
You're on the air.
All right, I'm back.
Sorry, you're on the air.
1-800. Oh, good. I'm glad I stopped saying what I was saying. 1-800-734-2132. Do I have Jay?
Yeah, hi, Carl.
How are you?
Sometimes I have to wait. I'm fine. How are you doing?
Good.
Because I don't know the phone number. I have to wait 2 or 3 times till you give it so I can get it all down.
Jay, there's a test on this next week.
You know, and I'll tell you this. I was told when I first started in radio that the one thing you can't do too often is repeat the number, because it somebody's driving down the road, they hear the number and they're like, oh crap, I'll get a pen out. Then they hear it again and they get the they get the 800 part, and so you really do have to repeat it 5 times sometimes before a person will get the number.
Yeah, because it's not easy, and it's not like you're doing 1-800 radio or something like that. But anyway,
maybe I should find a snazzier number.
Yeah, here's my question. I actually have a legal question. I may, for the first time, have to do some dealing with different taxing authorities, including the IRS, because some of the issues I had in last year where I was for the first time self-employed, and it's not like I really anything in dispute. I just did something maybe wrong, and I may have to negotiate or have some things negotiated. And I guess I remember years ago when I used to listen to some national talk show, the guy would talk about bringing in like an enrolled agent, which I assume was more of an accountant than a lawyer.
Right.
I guess at what point, and I have my taxes done by a major, firm, national firm, that kind of stuff.
Right.
And both I and my wife do have some personal, I should say, self-employment. But anyway, I may wind up with a shortfall, I guess, is what happens. And obviously I have this firm, but if I need to have somebody talk for me, and I really don't have any real good reasoning, except I was just lazy about doing some paperwork, do I go? I guess I need a lawyer who specializes in that kind of thing.
Here's the answer. We usually tell people CPA, and the reason is they're qualified to represent you. They know the regulations better, but more importantly, unlike the average lawyer, they deal with those people all the time. Mm-hmm. So they know Susie Q and they know Bobby B and all the people that are on the numbers that you call to deal with this stuff. Okay. So if you have a more esoteric problem, then you get a tax lawyer, but they're really for more creative issues than run of the mill.
Well, there's really no dispute as far as with tax laws or any of that kind of stuff.
Right.
But I guess I could hire someone who didn't necessarily do my taxes.
It can be anybody. I usually just recommend a CPA because they know the ins and outs, they know the parties involved.
Maybe it's a situation where I simply didn't pay on time, or I didn't pay enough tax, or that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And I may have, I'm going to owe them something, and I may not be able to pay it all at one time. So,
yeah, like I say, I would go
worry about things like liens and stuff like that.
I would go CPA, and that would be my advice.
Okay, well, hopefully it won't be too bad.
I've been sending. I've been sending people to different accountants over the years, pretty much around here. You've got Greenewald, Smith Elliott and Kearns, a couple other firms in the area. Klingler, yeah, John. I was just trying to think of John's last name. So between those three and that's just central Pennsylvania. There's probably 10 more CPA firms who are probably steaming mad that I don't know their names off the top of my head. But
I'm not sure it's going to be a question of I deducted something I shouldn't have deducted.
No. But I'm not advising the CPA for that purpose. I'm advising the CPA from the purpose of
because
they know everybody and they can negotiate it and they know what's actually reasonable. And they're not one of these guys you hear advertised on the radio who's really just going to put you with a file clerk who calls an 800 number with the government and does what you could have done on the 800 number.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'll try that.
That was my thought. Hey, you want to hear my son singing?
Sure.
Hold on. I had him sing. See if I can get this going here.
I guess it beats
what do you have to
him.
say about Christmas?
We wish you a Merry Christmas. We wish you a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Jingle bells, jingle all the way. Oh, what fun it is to ride in wonders open sleigh. Hey, jingle bells.
Good job, Anson. Do you have anything?
There we go, huh?
That's pretty good.
Not bad for a 4-year-old.
Yeah, and then the way he segues into that other song.
Yeah, just boom, right in.
Yeah.
We have an opening for a morning man.
You need a morning man. My morning man was not a morning man this morning. I had to get him out of bed to get him over to the babysitters to come here. And he's like, why are you waking me up so early?
Yeah. I'm kind of waiting for some of those WHP veterans to give you a call, but
Well, you know what? We got to get the word out because it's amazing how information flows. I'm still talking to people every day on the phone who go, oh, I didn't know you switched stations, or I didn't know you're on WIOO at 8 a.m. in the morning now. So if you know anybody or you mention it to anybody.
Yeah, of course, because Facebook is probably how I found out, I guess, and probably a lot of them aren't in that ballpark.
I'm going to have to convince the owners here to take out some full-page ad in the Patriot to announce it.
Yeah. Well, there you go.
I think they're laughing at me.
Yeah. That's great.
What?
Let me know when that happens.
Well, I wish I could think of some other thing I've done recently that's
that's nefarious or bad.
Not much of a scofflaw. I did serve on a jury once, but that was murder trial many years ago in Philadelphia. And I was very impressed. This was like 1974. And I was very impressed at the time as far as the way the system worked to safeguard, the situation. You couldn't even go into the defense attorney had to cool his heels. He couldn't go into the bathroom while we were.
Yeah. Well,
while the jury was in there.
A judge had said in a case I was in, made the comment that a jury is a political act. In other words, there's really no need for a jury in the strictest sense because judges have been deciding fact and law forever, and that's their job. But interposing a bunch of citizens in between is a way of saying the government doesn't have the final say. It's a political act to put people in control of the process, which is why, of course, as you know, I like to talk about jury nullification. So, for instance, we don't tell jurors anymore that they're allowed to decide the law, even though they are. And if you're a juror out there and you're ever on a jury, remember this. You have the right, the absolute right, if you disagree with the law, to ignore it. And they don't tell you that because in the late 1800s, a Supreme Court said that you need not tell jurors about it. But the first Supreme Court justice, himself, I can quote him for you, saying that the jury has the right to decide the law and that while they should try to follow it if they feel it's unjust or unjust under the circumstance, they can decline to follow it. So not only can juries decide facts as you're told, but every day in Pennsylvania, judges, I believe, lie to juries and say that I'm the law and you have to follow me on the law. If I was on a jury, Jay, I would get up. When they get me back in the jury room, first question I send out is, "Dear Judge, is it true that a jury can nullify and not follow the law? Number 2, if we commit an act of nullification, what is the penalty, if any? And number 3, is it true that you won't tell us about nullification unless we ask about it, but does it really exist? Throw a bunch of questions at him and watch him hem and haw, and make him lie. Make him lie if he'll do it.
Yeah. The thing that does bug me, occasionally you hear this from people that think there should be professional jurors, and because people, your everyday people don't have any background in the law, and I really I hate that idea. I mean, I think it's just an awful idea to have this class of people. Only certain people. It's like there are people that think you shouldn't be able to run for office or you shouldn't be president unless you were in the military. It's the same thing. This part of this jury movement comes from this, out of control civil lawsuit thing, and what's really funny about it is, if somebody said it this way, they're like, people hear about a jury verdict and they decide that the jurors are a bunch of idiots and they couldn't possibly, know what they were doing when they gave that woman with the McDonald's coffee money, or when they gave some other person money for something else. But everybody's fine with letting jurors decide the death penalty. And you can't have it both ways. Either they're competent to decide life and death for a human being, and therefore you have to respect their decisions generally, or they're not. And you can't have it both ways. But for some reason, the what I call the hard right thinks that jurors are inane when it comes to civil things, but they're the right group of people to put somebody to death or to spare them life. Well, we all lean one way or the other.
But I'll tell you something else real interesting. The jury, the woman with the McDonald's coffee, and I may have talked about this before.
I got a feeling this is going to be similar. My cousin's a lawyer, and I always hear these.
Well, yeah, she wasn't driving the car. And the car wasn't driving when she spilled the coffee. She was sitting in a parking lot. Her nephew was driving. She was trying to put the creamer in that they handed her and the sugar, and the lid came off funny, and the hot coffee poured in her lap, and she got third-degree burns. And they discovered that, and I used to think it was like a few. Turns out over 700 instances of people being burnt over like a 9-year period.
So how did the rumor, the story start about her? She was driving and she spilled coffee. It just simplified. Yeah,
what happened, interestingly, was it was picked up by the Chamber of Commerce, and there's a theory that the facts may have been intentionally distilled. And I don't know if you remember the Willie Horton ad or not. But in the day, if you watch the Willie Horton ad sometime, and you show it to people, and if you show it to a group and you have to answer questions about what they saw in the ad, they say all the wrong things because the ad doesn't say what most people conclude it says. It was designed specifically to be factually true but leave a false impression, okay? And it worked really well. And I feel like that's how they managed the story. They managed to distill it down to where they didn't actually write she was driving. Now the comedians ran with it and etc., but the original press releases about it are factually true, but entirely misleading, and people ran with it. And Jay, I'll tell you something. It's really interesting. I just posted an article on my Facebook this morning that I got off Twitter, and it was posted to Twitter on my Twitter feed. It basically talks about how the internet anymore, anything false not only gets traction, but everybody just repeats it. So somebody posted on my Facebook this morning a guy who baked cookies to look like iPhones, and he driving around in Canada where you can't be on the cell phone at all, and trying to get a police officer to pull him over. And when the police officer pulls him over, he takes a bite out of his cookie. Well, then it follows up the story with a Twitter feed. He did like a live Twitter feed where he basically got arrested because of an outstanding parking warrant, okay? And so he's got this whole thing about the cookies and the parking warrant. Well, of course, all these people are posting about how this idiot comedian got himself arrested and blah, 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 all based on his own Twitter feed. Well, it turns out this guy's notorious for Twitter pranks and internet scams, and that's kind of his funny shtick. And, of course, he baked iPhone cookies. Of course, he got pulled over by the police, but he didn't get arrested. He just took a Twitter feed and made up a story about getting arrested about this so that people would go viral with the story. And it did. It worked.
I kind of admire. I mean, you know, that's the kind of thing I would find amusing.
Yeah, it's very clever, isn't it?
Work, but of course, when you take the internet and you throw it out there, I have very mixed feelings about the internet. I mean, it's great. You can do a lot of things on it, and it's great for communications. But like anything else,
right,
you have that dark side.
You don't have to sneak in and out of adult bookstores. I mean, it's great.
Yeah, I missed the first 10 minutes. Did you touch on the Duck Dynasty situation now that A&E has kind of...
You know, we talked about it last week, but it's good. We didn't talk about it yet this week, so it is a good follow-up, right?
Yeah.
First of all, as of last week, right, A&E's going crazy, and then the one that was the most interesting is Cracker Barrel comes out and says, we're pulling some Duck Dynasty stuff. And, of course, there was a lot of interesting... That was on their own Facebook page, so you know it's true, right? Or at least it should be true. And there was a lot of interesting, gloating on some sides by, hey, the favorite restaurant of conservative America is the one who's the first to pull Duck Dynasty products. What are you conservatives going to do? Are you guys going to boycott them too? Well, apparently there was enough of a brouhaha that they then promptly reversed themselves in less than 24 hours and said, no, we're not pulling anything from Duck Dynasty, and we made a mistake. We were fully supportive, his right to free speech or some such thing. Which, of course, we know this is not really free speech at all because it's private actors, and therefore government isn't involved at all. But so you saw that, and then, of course, A&E. And so it's interesting because it proves what I already knew to be true. All anybody really cares about is where the money's at. And as soon as a corporation decides that, well, A&E decided we need to do something because we're going to get hammered by the LGBT community and their supporters, they made their move. And then now that they've redone their mental calculus and said, well, they may be upset at us about this, but we're going to change our position now because the almighty dollar is more important. Reminds me of what a law school professor of mine used to say. Professor Marr, who used to be dean at Dickinson Law School, taught corporations, used to say, you know, people want corporations to be good citizens and environmentalists and do this and do that. And he said, that's the last thing you want. You don't want your corporations to be good citizens because you don't want corporations involved in government at all, because all they care about is where the wind blows. And he said, so in Nazi Germany, all the corporations were what? Good fascists, right? And here, this proves his point. What is A&E and what is Cracker Barrel? They're whatever they think is going to sell the most product. They're not no corporation wants to save the environment. No corporation wants to help people. That's all horse hockey.
Well, let me ask you this. Do you think, and this is speculation, do you think if this guy had gotten in the same position, say Paula Dean, who didn't have the financial impact, I guess, or pull that these guys did, do you think if he had been jumped on for the same thing that she did, that they would have changed their minds?
Well,
I mean, do you think there's a difference in you know, her situation?
Yeah, you can. Yeah, well, there's also some random luck involved in it as well, and I'll come back to that in a second. I think, you know, Paula Dean actually, and hers is a great story too, because she actually got thrown out the issue of racism and the underlying lawsuit that caused her all the problems. Instead, she went into a deposition and answered these questions that showed, you know, she had maybe some issues, and so she also got bit for being honest in her deposition, right? So the Paula Dean story is interesting because the underlying merits of the lawsuit turned out to be shaky and were absolutely dismissed on racial issues. Number two, she went into the depot and told the truth, and that ended up getting her even more trouble. You could take some mixed lessons. Of course, her original behavior that she told the truth about is the real problem. But
well, I guess what I was saying is it okay to I shouldn't say jump, but I'll say, is it okay to criticize the LGBT lifestyle
More so than race right now.
Yeah.
More so than race right now. Although that's rapidly changing, and that's part of the reason why everybody's getting it wrong. And what I mean by that is America is, and this would be true, I mean, I want you to think about this. If it was 1954 and an entertainer made some racist remarks, odds are they were just going to be brushed under the table. Nobody, some people might in various areas say, "Oh, he shouldn't have said that. That was terrible," whatever. But they're not doing anything. At some point in our history, I don't know, 80s or 90s or somewhere in there, we got to the point where we generally aren't going to tolerate. Who was the newscaster? It was Howard Cosell who got canned for making
He wasn't the only. I mean,
Jimmy the Greek.
Jimmy the Greek.
Jimmy the Greek did,
So there was a certain point when a racial remark, and I don't know how to describe this, except there seems to be a pendulum, that swings, or an arc, and at some point we don't care what you say about some class or thing, So at one point, retard, you call somebody a retard, that's okay. Now you can't use the R word anymore, and then we get to a point where any use of an inappropriate moniker under that certain classification is instant death. And then society gets past it a little more, and we get to the point where he shouldn't have done that, but it's not necessarily fatal anymore as long as it was just inadvertent. But here's the real deal. It all depends on this crazy news cycle. And I really think that Phil benefited from two things with Duck Dynasty. Was number one, we were running into the Christmas holiday, which means that people's attention and the news and everything. I mean, when does the government release bad news, right? The Friday before Christmas weekend or whatever, so that nobody pays attention. So you don't get the news cycles. But number two, and interestingly, remember they were criticizing him because all he was doing was talking his Christian religion. That was kind of the argument, right? And why are we penalizing him for just talking about what's in the Bible? Well, it just happens to be Jesus' birthday coming up as well. So I think that also countered some of the sting that would have occurred if this had happened, say, 2 months ago, where we would have been running into a holiday cycle, but we also wouldn't have been running into a major Christian holiday, which because remember, Christmas time, everybody's 3 times as Christian as they are the rest of the year.
Well, not me, but
right. But just go to a church and see all the people.
I understand.
All those empty pews that are suddenly full, and with the suddenly pious. But my point is, I think that really affected the flow of this. Also, he did make some potentially racial remarks that have been brought up.
Right.
And those have just gained no traction. And here's the answer. My good friend, my very, very, very good friend, Rush Limbaugh, had said a while back about Tiger Woods. He said, do you think that the national media was completely incapable of figuring out that Tiger was flaunting around with these girls? He said, think about how anybody who's famous gets followed and paparazzi and all this kind of stuff. He's like, everybody in the industry knew that Tiger Woods had 1 million girlfriends and he was, flying around having fun everywhere. He's like, but Tiger Woods has billion-dollar contracts with billion-dollar companies who advertise in all the national media. And he said, and I believe him on this, he said it was sort of like nobody wanted to be the one who ruined Tiger, because if you ruin Tiger, you're going to hurt so many big financial interests. Those are the same guys who advertise in your magazines and buy your airtime. And that Tiger Woods got a free pass for a long time until there was a major police incident, right? Where nobody could cover it up because somebody was smashing his car with a golf club, which is also, I thought, kind of poetry emotional by itself. And that there was a conspiracy of silence around Tiger Woods, that he got a free pass on that behavior. And I think that happens. I think that now the media powers that be, because A&E is not owned by like one guy. I mean, this is all these are part of these conglomerates. They're all kind of like looking at each other like, okay, we got the Duck Dynasty thing back under control. Nobody do anything. No harm, no foul. That's right. So I don't know, Jay. I don't know. What do you think?
Well, I don't know. I haven't had the coffee yet.
Do you believe in grand conspiracies like that, where it's not a like everybody got together?
I do believe. No, I just believe. There are the powers that be, And you're right. I mean, I do believe that by and large they control.
There's a state senator or rep up in New York, out of Buffalo. He's a Democrat. He voted against the SAFE Act in New York, this gun control legislation. He's been very vocal about it. He's been in the legislature, 20-some years or something like that.
He voted against it, you said?
Yeah, he voted against it. He's one of the only Democrats that voted against it, but he's from Western New York, so it makes sense. The Buffalo people are big gun people. And he's been very vocal against the governor about it and criticizing it, and now they're arresting people and doing all kinds of crazy stuff up there. So all of a sudden, this is my mother talking, by the way, she says all of a sudden 4 women have come out who all used to work for him over the last, say, 20-some years, saying that he sexually harassed them. And my mom said, she goes, so in the last 20 years, not one of these women can mention a thing about him, can come forward and say anything bad about him. But all of a sudden, he gets into a major brouhaha with the governor of the state over his prize legislation. And after the major thing hits the press, a few days later, these women suddenly start coming forward in droves to say that he's...
Yeah, and somebody, whoever his opponents are, or certainly found them, or
right,
knew about it.
And drug them out now. They were saving them for a rainy day. And that's how it works.
I find it very difficult to believe, and and I go back to when Kennedy was in the White House, and everything was kept pretty quiet. But I find it hard to believe that in today's world, with devices in everybody's hand and everything else, that anybody can really get away with anything, unless you're very, very rich or powerful. Or I'm actually surprised that if it's true, it didn't come out before.
Well, and
whether it's true.
And the answer is maybe it was true, but those women thought they wouldn't have any support, and now somebody went, like you said, rounded them up and said, we'll make sure you all get money. Or reminds me of major university scandals. I got to let you go, Jay, because I got to take care of a couple housekeeping things here.
Take care.
All right,
Bye.
my friend. Bye. 1-800-734-2132. That's a talk line number. If you have a legal question, you might be able to get it on the air here. 1-800-734-2132. And, of course, that's the 1-800 number for my law office, this show, and our 24/7 voicemail system. So if you have a legal question anytime, jump in there. I want to remind you, Carlisle Beer and Cigar right over here in Carlisle by the Walmart used to be, I'm trying to remember what the name of that used to be, Carlisle Beverage, or I forget what it used to be over there.
Carlisle Beverage.
Beverage, yeah. They've now got a great little walk-in humidor that's stocked with a lot of really good cigars. I was over there the other day and got a few. It's good. I like it just to stop in and pick some up. They also have a good selection of beer. I like the number 9 in a can myself. But stop at Carlisle Beer and Cigar over there and tell them Carl Rominger sent you, and pick up a couple cigars. It really is the best. Well, it's really the only humidor in town these days. So if you're a cigar smoker, that's where you want to be. Don't forget to call RJ Gold Auctions at 645-0061 if you have an auction or you want to liquidate an estate or business. And remember that he purchases medals, pins, patches, tokens, awards, badges, and most historical collectibles. RJ Gold, 645-0061, PA license auctioneer AU 005798. Let's keep monitoring it's Duck Dynasty controversy. We'll keep monitoring, actually, more importantly, the NSA issues. And I will be back with you live next week. Don't forget, at 1-800-734-2132. Take care. God bless.
From the L.B. Smith Ford Lincoln Studios, this is Country Gold FM, WIOO Carlisle, and WEEO Shippensburg.
From ABC News, I'm Karen Chase. Bad news for Target customers whose credit card numbers may have been stolen in the Black Friday hack attack. After initially denying it, Target officials now acknowledge the PIN numbers of those cards were taken too. However, they insist the numbers are encrypted. Crime analyst Rod Wheeler says not for long.
Once they unencrypt that data, that means that everybody's credit card accounts and bank accounts is potentially vulnerable to being used, to being hacked by these individuals.
Security experts are urging customers to get new cards or at least change their PIN numbers. The check is no longer in the mail. Extended unemployment benefits officially end today for over 1 million people who've been out of work for more than 6 months. Alfredo Brasina in Florida says he was barely making it as it was.
Unemployment benefits is $275 per week. I don't understand why. It doesn't cover half of my rent.
Congress may restore the funding, but not until members return next month. California is extending its family leave policy to up to 6 weeks of paid time off to care for a seriously ill spouse, child, or domestic partner. It'll also expand it to include care for siblings, grandparents, grandchildren, and even parents-in-law. The 74 people cooling their heels in a polar expedition ship stuck in the ice off Antarctica say they're trying to be patient.
At the moment, we're just waiting. And in the meantime, just keeping the spirits of the rest of the team high.
A Chinese rescue ship also got trapped and had to turn back. A second ship is on the way. Duck Dynasty patriarch Phil Robertson is going back to work on A&E's most watched show. The network lifted his suspension despite his controversial comments on homosexuality after fielding a fan backlash. A landscaper blowing grimy leaves on a street in Long Island, New York, was himself blown away when he found a scratched-off lottery ticket worth $1 million. He gave it to authorities, hoping the real winner would claim it, but no one did, so he kept it. He says the owner probably didn't realize it was a winner. You're listening to ABC News.
At the Sears New Year's celebration, we're ringing in deals that are so big, we need to celebrate. Hit it.
Oh, yeah! Up to 25% off all Kenmore appliances and even more with a Sears card. Shall we have some fireworks?
Head to the Sears New Year's celebration and get up to 25% off all Kenmore appliances, plus an extra 15% off all appliance brands $4.99 and over with your Sears card.
Sears, where better happens. Savings range from 5 to 25%. Offer valid 12/26 through 1/5. Exclusions apply. See store for details. Extra Sears card savings not combinable with deferred financing.
Another money-saving secret from Arm & Hammer.
My name is Malena. I'm from Los Angeles, California. I love Arm & Hammer Sensitive Skin Plus Scent laundry detergent. It cleans really well. It doesn't irritate my skin, and it smells wonderful.
Arm & Hammer Sensitive Skin Plus Scent has a skin-friendly scent people love, so it's preferred 2-to-1 over the leading free and clear detergent, and it costs up to 30% less.
We've been on a very tight budget lately, so it's a no-brainer.
The clean you need at a fraction of the cost.
The final report on the Sandy Hook school shooting has been released by the Connecticut State Police. It contains thousands of documents, photos, and text messages, along with interviews of neighbors and acquaintances. ABC's Aaron Katersky has some details.
In a canvass of Adam Lanza's neighborhood following the shootings, FBI agents said one person they interviewed reported that Adam never completely accepted that he had a disease, Asperger's, and therefore never took any of his medication as he was prescribed. Adam was in complete denial of his disease, this person told the FBI. Images released from inside the home make clear Adam Lanza's mother was in no such denial. There are books on Asperger's, relationships, divorce, and forgiveness.
A 6-year-old Utah boy is being called a hero for helping save his grandfather's life when his granddad passed out at the wheel while driving in a diabetic shock, and he leaped out of the moving vehicle to get help.
I ducked and rolled, and then I hurried and started running to this house, and I dinged on the door, and they said, "What's wrong?" And I said, "My grandpa has diabetes."
The vehicle was moving slowly and was stopped by a snowbank. The grandfather says he's very grateful the boy acted so responsibly. China's president turned heads when he dropped in at a Beijing bakery and stood in line just like everybody else to buy lunch. He even paid for it himself. Such simple visits are rare among Chinese leaders, who usually travel with heavy security and never mingle with the public. This is ABC News.
The Exergen Temporal Scanner Thermometer gives a fast, accurate temperature reading with just a gentle forehead scan and is used and recommended by more medical professionals everywhere. Here's what a real Exergen customer had to say.
This is a wonderful product. When I was in the hospital having my baby, the nurses used one to take my temperature, so I decided to get one. It's a fantastic product. I recommend to everyone.
Backed by over 50 published medical studies, more than any other thermometer, know you're getting the best. The Exergen Temporal Scanner Thermometer.
Karen Chase, ABC News.
Hi, this is Ed Belden for your Good Neighbor Pharmacies, Big Spring, Holly, and Quality Care. Our after Christmas sale is in full swing. From now until after the new year, all Christmas items are 50% off. When the items are gone, they're gone. No rain checks. Check store for details. Now's the time to buy that Christmas item you've been looking for use next year and get it at half price. Visit our websites, hollypharmacy.com, qcpharmacy.com, and bigspringpharmacy.com. We are Holly Pharmacy, 31 North Ball.